Yay Networks.
I printed out a contract. I set her down. I said, London, we're going to sign a contract. Now, she thought I was like the lamest person on the face of the planet. And I said, no, if you want to have a phone, we're going to sign a contract and we're going to make guidelines, right? What is the amount of time? And here's strike 1, 2, 3. When you do these things, you lose your phone for 2 days and then 5 days and then 2 weeks. And then she signs it. And so it's just.
I have a phone contract in the back of the book.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Happily Ever Ambyr podcast. I am your host. I'm Ambyr. Today, we are talking all things anxiety and resilience with the one and the only Dr. Pressman. Dr. Pressman is a developmental psychologist, and she is full of so much knowledge and hope and joy. There is so much going on in the world. So it is such a great time to have a conversation to understand how we could help our kids and ourselves be resilient when it comes to anxiety. She offers some great tips and advice, and we are talking about the 5 R's. And if you want to hear about the 5 R's, you have to listen to this episode because I am going to start implementing them into my life today. Thank you, everybody, for joining again. This is about having a journey, I like to call it a road trip with you guys on living a happy, fulfilled life. And I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. You are a very busy woman and helping so many people right now in a time that is just unsettling and confusing, not only for kids, but for humanity.
For all of us. Yeah.
So I want to jump in a little bit about anxiety in kids. And, you know, there's so much anxiety. It's so prevalent right now. And I have so many friends that are just like coming to me knowing that I have a child who suffers from anxiety, and also myself. Why do you think this is happening? What do you think is going on in our world today that's causing these kids? And I'm sure there's a million different reasons, but what are you saying from your end?
Well, I mean, I think the uncertainty of the world and the availability of how uncertain the world is, just from information wise, is unsettling, even when there isn't something awful going on. But we've just had one thing after another that's incredibly visible, and it's impacting all the adults. Of course, it's going to impact kids. So I think we have to recalibrate like our alarm system, because I think there's a lot of false alarms going off for kids and adults, and then getting completely validated because then terrible things are happening. Mm-hmm. And it starts to make it very hard to calibrate and like figure out what is real, what is imagined, what is your body telling you, what information is important and necessary, and what information is like noise that is just sending you the wrong messages. And I just think between that and the fact that I think parents are given so much anxiety-provoking messaging that every false move we make is somehow going to lead to X, Y, or Z. And I love what I do. I struggle because I think no information is chaos forming. And why would we want no information? We are so lucky in this scientific age to have information. But too much information causes this rigidity of how you're supposed to be as a person and a parent, that of course, both of those things are so consistent with anxiety. And so I hope that I can be some voice in between, but I don't know that, it's serving parents right now to have so much information. And I don't think it's serving kids. And I am a person who loves information. I mean, I went into a field that is all about research. And so I don't want to suggest that it's not important. It's obviously critically important. But we've just gotten to a place where I think we've lost our way a little bit. And the people who are meant to be guiding have also. So it's just, it's a recipe for some problems. And honestly, like I love social media for the good stuff. I loathe social media for the bad stuff. I don't think that it is doing anyone any favors when it comes to anxiety, because for the majority of the things that we pay attention to, the way we're going to get to pay attention to them is if it's startling. And then, we pay more attention. So then we get more of that. And, nothing is super interesting when you're like, well, it depends. I mean, most of the things that I say are not interesting because they're really middle of the road. And I get very worried for parents that have to try to parent in this era because it's not like you want nothing. I mean, you remember Mad Men with the kids who would like come in the room and they have the dry cleaning bag over their head and they're like smoking. It's just like, we didn't know it. I mean, we know what the message was of like back then parents didn't know and blah, blah.
Right.
I don't think that was any good, but I just think between that and I think we're seeing this right now in this particular time. The word expert is so, hard for people because it makes them feel maybe resentful, like there is an expert in something. And yet there's a lot of stuff going on right now where I'm like, I would like an expert in this particular area to help me understand what's going on. And I would like all of the noise just removed because that noise is so dangerous. And there are other times when, expert gets misused and you feel like, as a parent, you're definitely the expert in your kid. Full stop. Nobody else is. You might seek out an expert to help you put together some information to make the best choices for your child. I mean, you have had this experience over and over.
Yep.
But I think those are all of the things in the soup that makes this a really tough time to be a person.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Okay, guys, let's talk. There's a lot going on in our world, in our homes, in our communities, you name it, from our jobs to our kids, to our significant others, to our pets. I don't know about you guys. When I go to bed at night, sometimes I have a really hard time falling asleep because my to-do list, my stress tends to come at night and I have overwhelming thoughts. I have those automatic negative thoughts that keep me from having a great night's sleep, which I don't like because sleep is so important. I'm a huge believer in therapy. I literally have my kids in therapy. I make Jeff go to therapy with me. I love therapy. So if you are looking for a space to learn positive coping skills, or how about setting boundaries? Boundaries are so important and it's going to empower you to be the best version of yourself. It could be if you've experienced trauma that you haven't had a chance to come face to face with. It could just be the little day things that just trigger you that you need to work through, and that is okay. So I recommend therapy, and if you don't have a therapist right now, you guys need to give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, okay? So there's no excuses. It's flexible, so if little Sarah has soccer practice all of a sudden, you can move your day and time, and it's suited for all of your schedules, okay? So you just have to fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapist anytime for no additional charge. That's the best part because guess what? You're not going to match with everyone, and the fact that BetterHelp has options for different therapists, I love that. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/HEA today to get 10% off. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/HEA, and get 10% off. There's no excuses. Go to betterhelp.com/HEA today. One of the things that made me think so recently, my eldest lost her phone. And that's, I didn't know how long to take it away for, like this, figuring out what like an appropriate consequence was for, did it match what her behavior was? And I was like, this is a great time. Now you have to remember London, has panic disorder and has suffered from anxiety her entire life. So it's like, And I did give her a phone. And when I took it away, the behavior and just the overall change that I saw in her for 4 weeks. Now she doesn't have Instagram and she's not seeing these things. She became a different kid. And it really hit me like, we need to get back to our roots, right? Not 2023. And I'm not saying it needs to be the 50s where, like you said, parents don't know what their kids are doing. We need to find somewhere in the middle where our kids are learning to make mistakes and not overparent them, but at the same time, really teach these kids how to be resilient, right? Resilient in society, living independently on their own, and also just resilient with their emotions, because anyone who suffers from anxiety or has anxiety knows that it doesn't go away, right?
No, it's learning to live with the existing.
So
feeling.
Learning to live with the feeling. That's a great way to put it. I guess my question is, how do we wire our kids for resilience, like being resilient in their own bodies? And what are those messages, or what are those direct words in those moments to be able to one day be able to, recognize the feeling, like, okay, I'm feeling really scared right now, or I feel like a little panic attack is coming on, and to be able to feel empowered to know that they could put themselves back, ground themselves, and carry on in their life.
Well, I think there are two things that I want to address from what you just said. The first is just some of the wiring is just what it is, right? Like, we are the flower that the seed that was planted is the flower that we're going to become. And to try to, you said you recognize kind of some of these things in your child when she came out, like that's temperament. They're just things that are part of who we are. And so one of the things that parents can do in general is to really pay attention to who is my child and how am I going to parent this particular child. And if you have multiple kids, you start to believe in temperament. Like, it's hard to believe that some things just really are what they are until you've had multiple kids. And then you're like, oh, right. I'm not in control of everything. And so I think part of it is recognize, really paying attention to who your child is so that you can best address their experience of being in the body they're in the world that they're in. But when doing that, getting a little bit cozier with the idea of how utterly uncomfortable it is to watch our kids experience the range of emotions they're going to experience. And that, of course, we want to fix every one of those feelings, and we want to fix make the experience easier for them.
Right.
But that you need to, again, the boring balance of, I want this child to be guided and learn, but I don't want to get them so outside of their comfort zone that they go into a stress response. And for each kid, that's going to be different. But what we tend to do is see a stress response, panic, and fix it. And then it reinforces the idea that we don't believe that they can experience that hard feeling and survive to tell the tale unless we're there to fix it. So I think that's one thing, is just and some of it's guilt. Like, I do think the pandemic, we as parents felt collectively so guilty about our kids missing out on their childhood for a time that we kind of felt uncomfortable with any of the tough stuff they were experiencing. And we wanted to make it feel better, which is understandable. And then I think we kind of lost our way a little bit because we got used to it. And it was hard to come back to like, whoa. But then the other thing about resilience, part of resilience is unrelated to our parenting and unrelated to our kids. It has to do with the environment in which they were born. It has to do with their city, school, socioeconomic status, like time and place in the world, what's going on, all of that stuff. Nothing we can do about that. So in my view, let's not worry about that, other than, of course, being responsible citizens who try to make the world a better place in general. But then there's 5 areas that we can actually have something to do with when it comes to resilience. And that's, to me, heartening and something to focus on. And that's why I wrote a book on 5 things, because I
cannot wait. Wait, when is it coming out again?
January 25th, but I can send it to you now. Not to worry. But so there are 5 core areas of research in this field. They've been around for decades. We're getting more and more information because we have neuroscience to back it up and all of that. But none of this is revolutionary. It's just, these are the 5 things that we know from science actually leads to resilience and is in our control. And I made up names because they are our words so that people could remember these 5 principles of parenting along with resilience. But they come from literature that has all sorts of names. So I can remind you of what those are. But relationship, reflection, regulation, rules, and repair. So
oh my gosh.
that's it.
Wait, can we stop right there? That is amazing. Just hearing those words, it's like, that's hopeful, right? I think it's like, it's hopeful, and like it feels attainable, and it just kind of like hearing those basic words in that order just makes you feel like it's going to be okay.
I really hope so. I want to give relief because these are things in our control. I want to let's just stop thinking about all the stuff that's out of our control. Our child's temperament, for example, is not in our control. How our child's brain works is not in our control, but how we respond is in our control. And so relationship, which you could say attachment relationship, you can say connection, you can say interaction, whatever it is, relationship is the biggest predictor of the buffering effect of all the bad shit that happens in the world. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
But having a close and connected relationship with an adult caregiver, ideally a parent who you love, trust, feel seen, that you understand that they love you for who you are. That parent, not fixing your feelings, but sitting next to you while you're having them, is the difference between toxic stress and tolerable stress.
And this is 100%. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Please.
This, for me, was the first step in fixing and repairing my relationship with my oldest daughter, who at the time when she was 5, 6, 7, she would have these tantrums, in the house, at school, in restaurants. I couldn't take her anywhere. And I was just like, what did I do wrong? But until I started going to therapy, diving into understanding what her learning differences were, her anxiety, and then coming to her going, mommy has this too. And I completely understand what it feels like. And some moments got really emotional between her and I because it was definitely touching, some of my own unhealed trauma.
Yeah.
But as soon as I started meeting her where she was and being vulnerable myself, my relationship with her completely changed. So it's spot on. And I because I've had that experience.
I think that's heartening because we control how we invest in our relationships. Like that to me feels heartening, but also that there's research that looks at levels of stress, and we see toxic stress is horrible for kids. It's horrible for kids to go through events that are traumatic, war, we're watching it right now, but also death of a loved one, witnessing abuse. Like there are horrible things that kids can experience, but which you would not wish upon anyone. Those are what would be in the category of toxic stress. But the fact that something gets moved to tolerable stress, which is part of building resilience, from just that one loving, supportive relationship, to me is like everybody breathe. Because if you are able to be that one person, you can make sure that in the face of anything, you can bolster resilience. So that's the first and most important thing. And then reflection, you kind of just mentioned it, but figuring out our own healing that needs to be done, figuring out why certain things trigger us, figuring out what's happening, taking a beat and just like paying attention and reflecting and showing our kids how to be reflective and not just reactive is another huge predictor of resilience. And again, we can model it, we can do it, and we get to, mess it up and then go back again. And then I think regulation, I would say, is two things. It's both co-regulation and self-regulation. The co-regulation our kids need. Again, all of the things that you've told me show me that you've experienced this, of when there's a developing brain, and it depends on the brain and it depends how long, because everybody's brain is different. But even if you're looking at a typical brain, the part of the brain that's capable of self-regulation in its fullest takes up until, 18 to 27 years to fully develop. And for some kids longer, and for some kids never. So given that, they need co-regulation. They need to borrow our regulation. And that is something that we get to control because we can practice regulating. And so we don't need to do anything else but find the passcode to our alarm system. So we stop having false alarms. And then we're able to kind of lend our nervous system to our kids in the process of their growing nervous system. And again, that is highly linked with resilience. So if you're sitting there and thinking, I get so set off so easily, what am I going to do? I'm excited to hear that, because it means, will you now know that you've reflected on that, and you can do the things that we all need to do to practice just taking a space between finding out how we feel and expressing it.
Yeah. And I think I find myself, there's no manual to being a parent, and you don't really know what kind of parent you're going to be. You have an idea, but then when you have a kid who maybe is a little dysregulated or is having anxiety or having a hard time, it adds another layer. And then, so for me, I was 21 when I had London. I was a baby. And so for me, I'm growing up with London. And I'm learning to heal myself as I'm teaching. So I actually told her the other day, I said, you have taught me so much about mommy. Sorry. And I never thought that that's how parenting works. But really, she has really taught me how to manage my own anxiety and know that together we're going to get through this. We're going to get through these moments together, and she's going to help me at times and I'm going to help her at times. And that's okay. And that's, for me, that is what my happily ever after really does look like, because I'm not perfect, right? As a mom, I'm not perfect. As a partner, as a friend. And I'm okay with that.
I mean, that's the thing, is like that idea that coming to the realization that we're learning from our kids. I mean, we're born as parents the day our kids are born. So how could anybody expect that we're supposed to just not get the wobbly toddler legs? We're a work in progress. And so,
yeah,
but accepting that gives so much room to grow.
Yeah. It's relief. There's relief in that.
Totally. But here's the thing that I think is extra tricky for people, and maybe it's just because of where I am. Rules are confusing, because when we talk about how important it is to have a relationship and connection, and how important regulation and reflection are, it gets uncomfortable and wonky, just like the story about the cell phone. Okay, how do I set this limit and boundary if I'm also not supposed to mess with my relationship? And I think that the balance there, the boring balance place, is you always first connect and have a deep commitment to your relationship. And part of that commitment is saying, I'm still the adult, and I need to make my child feel so safe that they understand there are going to be rules, because that's my job. And if I didn't believe that my child was safe following these rules or getting these rules, then I wouldn't make them. And so you just have to ask yourself that question. Did I honor my child's feelings? Step one.
Yeah.
But then, okay, I did. And I can even live with how horribly upset they are, because I'm not afraid of feelings anymore, because I know feelings aren't dangerous. And so if I set this rule, it's not because I'm just trying to be mean and disconnect from my child. It's because this is for them. And I think that sometimes people are, I'm really like, if I had to pick a strength, I'm really good at relationship. I'm not great at rules. That's the one I work on more, because it's
Me
hard,
too.
right? Like some people are really good with setting boundaries and having great, like clear rules. I definitely am like, that's more of a weak spot for me. So I focus on it. I honestly don't even pay attention to relationship because it's just a more natural thing. But I think there are other people who might be listening where they're like, I don't know the connection part, but I know how to set the rules and keep them clear and be consistent. Godspeed. Like, good. That's
boundaries keep you safe, right? When you have boundaries, they keep you safe. And one of the things that I adapted a while ago was, because again, that is my weakness, keeping boundaries or setting boundaries with myself, with other people, and with my kids, because all I want to do is just love them, and that's just who I am. And so what I say so I don't feel so bad, right? Because you give your kid a consequence and you're like, oh shit. But now that was like 4 weeks was a long time. And now I'm going to be tortured. They're going to be tortured. And they're going to bug me for 4 weeks. It's like, okay, some things are negotiable and some things are non-negotiable.
Yeah.
This consequence is non-negotiable. And I know it's really hard and it seems forever, especially in her mind. But what I tend to do sometimes is, one, like you said, we talk about feelings, right? And how this made you feel, how it made them feel. Then I say to most of the time to my eldest is, what do you think would be an appropriate consequence? And now that, by the way, that could be textbook, like, Amber, what the hell are you doing? That's not how you parent. But I want them to think about what they did. I want them to understand, maybe I didn't correctly say that, but I want her to reflect on understanding that no matter what you do, whether you're 13 or 35 or 27, there's going to be consequences, right? So I don't know. What are your thoughts about, am I really screwing up as a parent?
No, because I think if you said, I want to, especially as kids get older, like, I want to collaborate with you. There are going to be some things that I'm not, like, I'm going to ask you what you're thinking about it, but I'm going to make my own decision. Like, I'm the grown up.
Right.
But I think it's absolutely appropriate to say, hey, we've got a problem here. Like, these things can't happen, and they did. So what should we do next? And of course,
or you're spending too much time on your phone. Like, what do
you think is a good solution?
Right. And then there's pretty much, so one other thing that I did when I first gave London a phone is that I just went on Google. I printed out a contract. I set her down. I said, London, we're going to sign a contract. Now, she thought I was like the lamest person on the face of the planet for making her sign a contract. She's like, I'm not signing. And I said, no, if you want to have a phone, we're going to sign a contract, and we're going to make guidelines, right? What is the amount of time? And here's strike 1, 2, 3. When you do these things, you lose your phone for 2 days, and then 5 days, and then 2 weeks. And then she signs it. And so it's just these little things.
I have a phone contract in the back of the book. And honestly, it's not even because you have to have one. It's one of those extras that I put there, just like, if this works for you. It's not like the key to raising good humans, but like, it might make your life easier. But I think that you're right. Having an agreement together and agreeing to it, even with toddlers, like, choice makes us feel better about rules. And there are some things that are going to be non-negotiable, and some things where there's choice. And one of the choices you make might have consequences that you don't like. But, and if you've signed a phone contract and then you break that rule, you've made the choice and you had decided. And of course, their teenage brains, they're not, making the right choice all the time. And that's why we let them fall a little bit and see what it feels like. And then they learn over time what feels like a mistake they want to keep making, and what feels like something they need extra help with. Like, hey, I don't have a lot of self-control here. I need more guardrails up. And when they're just like, I've got this. I didn't like how that felt. I'm not doing it again. Thank you so much.
You know, I recently heard you speak about alcohol and vaping, and this is something that has been brought to my doorstep with my middle schooler saying, hey, kids are in the bathroom vaping. And it's such a crazy world that I'm just like, how do I even address this besides, like, it's starting so young and maybe it was always there. Listen, I grew up Mormon, so there was like, I lived like this, like that was my world, right? If I stepped out, I had like a Diet Coke or something.
Right. My college roommate, by the way, was Mormon, and Diet Coke was like her thing. And
See, it's a thing.
He was my assigned college roommate, Laura. And I was like, wait a minute, this is amazing, because she was like, I'm doing it. I'm having Diet Coke. And that was her big rebellion.
Oh, that's so funny. But I just want to touch on this because I think it's so selfishly, it's so valuable for me to hear this about these kids are having access and parents are letting them drink in their homes early. Like, can you just give can you give your 2 cents on like, why is that a bad path to go down?
So I think, we can use the same 5 R's for resilience, right? Your relationship is, I understand that this is tempting and I understand that your friends are doing it. But then you go down there, reflect, like, what is it going to mean if you do it? And why is this something that is worrisome to me? And then you go to your rules and you understand, like, hey, I still am your parent and I'm setting a barrier so that you have less exposure and access, because that's what we know keeps you more safe. So for all the parents that feel like, well, if they don't do it at my house, I'm worried they're going to do it somewhere else. That's actually not what the studies show. If you give kids access, they feel, for the most part, like you're condoning it. And so what you want to say is, my relationship with you is so close, I want to make sure you're safe. This is not safe for you. So let's figure out a plan for when you have that exposure, and I'll help you have an escape route. And also, of course, I'm always picking you up. I never want you to worry that you're going to get in more trouble telling me you made a mistake than by, making the mistake behind my back. So it's a balance there. But of course, you're going back to the same thing. If they do make a mistake and you do lose your mind with them, or you make a mistake, you have repair. And that is part of what makes us resilient. So I actually think you look at it's the same thing. Like, if you were like, how do I answer this question? You go through the same, it's the same for everything. Like,
I love that.
It's easier than we think. It just is like, each time we think, well, in this case, you wouldn't want to have rules because you don't want them to X, Y, or Z. No, you need rules. Because, like with vaping, for example, first, of course, you're going to explain like what this does to younger brains, developing brains. But that's not always going to work, because it's one thing in the moment when you're not tempted by friends. It's a total other thing when there are groups making these decisions. But if you've said, this is a hard line for me until your brain is more developed, and I'm going to stick with it. And also, I'm here if you make a mistake, and I'm going to be here to help you if you need to get out of a situation. Your kids are much less likely to have substance misuse than if you say, listen, I'd rather you be safe, so let's do it at home. And I might even provide the alcohol because I want to make sure that it's healthy. That doesn't really save anybody. And I know that that's harder even to say now, because in the age of fentanyl and all the scary stuff that's going on in the world. Yeah. Well, I also think separately, you need to say, full stop, no pills, no powder, no patterns. That is not.
I mean, we've seen it in LA, so many, and I'm sure this is happening, especially during the pandemic, kids getting drugs through Snapchat, like these people that are targeting these young kids who have severe anxiety, who have depression, who have parents that are not paying attention and they want to feel something. Like I literally just got chills all over my body. it's really, really heartbreaking for me to see. It's like, we need to wake up. I don't know what to say. It's just, it's unacceptable what's happening.
No, it's terrifying. I think also, and this is to be drilled into kids, it's not even strangers, that sometimes you think, oh, I'm getting this from my friend's sister's boyfriend. And so they would never hurt them, but they aren't getting it from someone that they know. So like, they probably aren't like intentionally harming someone, but you cannot. So I think the thing to be hard line about are pills. Like that is just like that is where you do have to explain like how dangerous it is and how serious it is and why.
We're a little extreme in our house. We literally say, you do drugs, you die. That's it. Like that's our thing. It works for us. I know it's probably instilling fear, but like, because you can. It takes one experimental party like to die or to have something or be a witness of a friend dying, which is very traumatic for kids.
And I think I would just distinguish between cannabis and the drugs that you're talking about, because with cannabis, they will watch too many people not die and you will lose credibility. Cannabis is just going to mess with your brain.
Yeah.
But
when you do hard drugs, you die. How about this? You do.
Yeah. But the hard drugs, there is a chance that you get one chance and then that's it. Yeah. So there is a distinction between those two things. And the only reason I say that is it's the same thing with like talking about sex. Like if you just say abstinence or you're going to get pregnant or an STI, STD.
Right. Yeah.
as they start to realize that's not true and that they can actually have sex and not get pregnant and not get in it, they'll stop being afraid. So you're much better off being like, I'm going to be honest with you here with alcohol and cannabis, like you probably won't die, but it will mess with your brain the earlier you start it.
Right. And it can lead you down a bad path. I think that's something we always say, especially with alcohol.
Bad choices, it's not safe. Like there are reasons behind not starting. Right. And also, even if you just show them, like, if this is a developing brain and as it's developing, this is like, oh, now we're fully developed and everything's going well and I have an adult brain. When you interrupt that with early exposure to substances, this is what happens. And so you're much more likely to have substance use or misuse disorders, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, getting worse and worse. And so if you come into this world from a family or a predisposition for any of those things, and you have substances, this is not a good recipe. So that's one thing. And then separately, there are certain things that just like, we don't know if it's going to kill you the first time or the last time, but it's definitely not something to even go near. And I'm here to help you be safe, but still be social. And like, if you're curious and you have questions, let's talk about it. And so that's where relationship and rules really both need to go hand in hand, because just relationship actually is not going to protect and just rules is not going to protect.
Right. Right. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is like, and having those 5 key principles is so good because things, like you said, things come up all the time. It's like every few weeks you go through a different phase with your child. Right. And so it's like the feeling and emotions are the same. The context changes, right? So you if you have something in your back pocket and you have your toolbox to like, oh, I know this, let's go through our checklist.
Yeah.
It just makes life a little less stressful.
I would like to just provide relief, but like not so much that you feel like you need this. Like I want parents to feel like they know their kid, they know themselves, and here's some science to mix in, and then boom, that's it.
Yeah, I love science, data. I love data and science. So I cannot wait to read this book. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about all these wonderful, frightening, but you know what? That's life. That's life. And it's just about finding joy. To the people listening and watching, if they wanted to get in touch with you, hear more about your book, or can we pre-order your book?
Yes, please pre-order it. You can get it wherever you get books, but if you pre-order it, and just save your order number. Go to draliza.com and I can give you an early chapter. And I'm doing live Zooms to talk to people about it beforehand. Ooh. So it's good pre-order. It's called The 5 Principles of Parenting, Your Essential Guide to Raising Good Humans. And I have Instagram is Raising Good Humans Podcast.
Oh, I love that. Okay. And they could get that podcast wherever they listen?
Wherever they listen to podcasts.
Okay. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, guys. That was an amazing episode. And thank you to Dr. Pressman for coming on. I really I learned so much. The 5 R's are such a fantastic approach to parenting. I personally love relationships. That was one of the R's that she had mentioned. I'm curious to see what you guys loved, what R resonated with you the most, and what you would like to do to start implementing those into your life, in your community. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me so much bring valuable content to you guys. I appreciate everybody. Thank you for being here, and till next time, cheers.
Yay Networks.